Hey, what's going on, family? Thank you for checking out this Eat Up Mondays snippet. If you like what you hear in this snippet, you can tune into the full Eat Up Mondays episode by clicking the link below in the description. Thank you, and until the next time we share a beautiful spiritual meal together, shalom. Today we're going to be coming out of Philippians chapter 4. We're going to be starting in that 10th verse. This is our brother Paul talking, and this is what it says. Verse 10 says, "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, that now at the last your care of me have flourished again." Paul is talking to the people at Philippi, and he's saying, listen, at last your care for me has flourished again. They were always, striving to look out for Paul and be a blessing to him. He goes on to say, "Wherein ye were also careful." That word careful there means working in a thoughtful way. He says, listen, you guys are always working in a thoughtful way, but you lacked opportunity. There was times that they were trying to be a blessing to Paul that they did not have the opportunity to do so. He goes on to say, "Not that I speak," and this is very important. Listen to what Paul says here in the 11th verse. He says, "Not that I speak in respect of want." That word respect there means to hold in high regard. The definition of want is desire for something or lack of something. So Paul says, listen, I am not saying these things in respect to want, because I'm holding the things that I may want or may need in a high regard. I think that is very important. But he goes on to say, "For I have learned in whatsoever state I am." That word learn there means I have come to know how. So he says, I have come to know how in whatever state I am therewith to be content. And this is so powerful because Paul is saying to them, he says, listen, I have learned whatever state I am in, I've come to know how to be content. That word content there means happy enough with what one has or is, not desiring something more or different, satisfied. And the reason why I said earlier that sometimes we don't like to talk about contentment or being content, because when we hear the words like not desiring more or being satisfied, we feel like, sometimes that's like putting a ceiling on our lives that, listen, we're pretty much capping off and saying, listen, we don't desire anything else. We don't want anything more for our lives, and, so on and so forth. But that's not what he is talking about here, because remember what he says. He says, I learn whatever state I'm in. And we'll go on to read what he means by that. But just to give you a little bit of, just to give you a little on what he's saying that whether I'm low or high, I've learned to be satisfied. And people, they feel like that's putting a ceiling on themselves, but it's not. What it's saying is that I am delighted in God, no matter what state I am, whether I'm low or I'm high, I am satisfied in the Lord. And in other words, I trust him enough to know that he is still in control of my life, and that no matter which of these states I am in, as long as I am satisfied in him, as long as I'm not trying to go ahead of him or want more than what God may want for me, that I'm going to be all right. And I think a lot of people don't understand, one of the things they think of is just, when they don't have, versus when they do have. They don't realize that there's two types of tests. There's a test when you're poor. There's a test when you're rich. If you remember in Deuteronomy chapter 8, when God was bringing them into the promised land, he tells them, don't forget about me. And we may say, well, why would God say, when you get into the promised land, not to forget about me? It's because God understands human nature. He understands that when we are constantly praying about something or trying to get to this particular destination, especially when it comes to financial things or material things. Remember, the land of Canaan was a land flowing with milk and honey, a land of no lack. And when we get to that place that we've been praying for and believing God on, it is very easy, even though we don't like to admit it, that once we get to the place that we were constantly praying about getting to, now we no longer need those things, or we are finally at this destination. If we're not careful, we won't any longer pray. We won't any longer seek God, because now we have the things that we've been praying for. Because the truth of the matter is most of the time, when you hear people's desires and their prayers, they're not praying to get more spiritually wealthy. They're not praying a lot of times to get closer to God or to understand understand his word more. Most people, if you sit down and have a conversation with them, it's going to be about the things that they lack in this world, the things that they would desire in this world. So God understood that it is very easy for us as human beings to get to that place of no lack and to become comfortable and to forget all about them. And that's why being content, or learning how to be content, is so important, because what contentment says is that I trust God and I'm willing to, I'm willing to trust God to the point of letting his will, be done in my life. A matter of fact, when you think about Psalm 37:4, probably one of the most popular quoted scriptures in the church, it talks about, when we delight ourselves in the Lord, he will give us the desires of our heart. And bad teaching, which you hear a lot of times, will tell you that once you delight yourself in God, that he's going to give you all the desires you ever wanted. That's not what that scripture is saying. To delight means, once again, to be satisfied. When you find yourself satisfied in God, when you're able to be like Jesus in the garden, nevertheless, not my will be done, but thy will, whatever your will is for my life. When you become to that point, it says that, basically he will give you the desires of your heart. But what it is saying is that you are now in a place of maturity to where his desires become your desires. So if there were some things that you desired that God did not necessarily want you to have, you are able to receive that and be like, God, I'm fine with that. Whatever it is you want for my life, I'm for that. And